Hello and welcome. This is Spotlight Ukraine. Trends, world politics and deep analytics made by Ukrainian journalists to the whole globe. Will Ukrainian energy system withstand the prolonged shelling? European Parliament recognized Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. What's next? 9 months of the full-scale war. Is the West doing enough for our victory? This is Spotlight Ukraine. More of this right now. The Russian forces continue to focus the main efforts on the Siversk, Bakhmut and Avdiivka directions in order to cordon off the city of Bakhmut and create favorable conditions for the further occupation of Donetsk region. At the same time, the Russian Federation makes unsuccessful attempts to regain the lost positions in the Kupiansk direction. More of that right now.
Ukraine-Russia war map. Fighting overview, November the 18th, 25th. This week, we will take a close look at the eastern part of the front, where Russian troops have transferred new forces that fled from Kherson region. Bakhmut and Donetsk. The outskirts of Donetsk and Bakhmut are the only areas on the front where the Russian forces are conducting offensive actions, but they have not advanced anywhere recently. It is most difficult for the Ukrainian Defense Forces fighters on the eastern outskirts of Bakhmut and Soledar. The Russian forces are trying to enter Avdiivka and also continue to storm Mayorsk, the seizure of which they announced last week. Russian troops have the greatest success on the eastern outskirts of Donetsk, in particular in Opytne and in the northern part of Marinka. At the same time, near Vuhledar, their plan to rapidly break through the Ukrainian defense and reach the Kurakhove direction failed. Despite the fact that Ukraine's armed forces withdrew from the southern part of Pavlivka, the Russian enemy did not manage to gain a foothold there, as it was being destroyed by Ukrainian artillery. However, they did not give up the idea of launching an offensive on Kurakhove again, and therefore checked the strength of all sections of the front from Pavlivka to Velika Novosilka. Luhansk region. The initiative on this part of the front once again passed to the Ukrainian soldiers, who increased their efforts to finally cut the Svatove-Kreminna route in the area of Ploshchanka and Chervonopopivka. The Russian enemy does not carry out any large-scale attacks, but only prepares a line of defense. Instead, Ukraine's armed forces are attacking Svatove from the north, storming Kuzamivka and advancing slowly but surely. After the announcement of the evacuation of the civilian population from Kreminna, Rubizhne and Severodonetsk, one gets the impression that the enemy does not plan to defend these settlements to the death. Moreover, it has been noticed that fresh reinforcements of Russian forces appearing in this direction do not go to the front, but dig in near Starobilsk, preparing a new line of defense.
By fighting Russian terrorism, Ukraine protects not only its own independence, but also the freedom of the whole of Europe. However, the successes of Ukrainian army on the battlefields would not be possible without the help of the democratic world. Israel, for example, recently made a statement that it would begin supplying Ukraine with high-precision missiles if Russia buys Iranian ballistic missiles. Until now, Jerusalem has tried to maintain neutrality, fearing that Moscow's reaction would exacerbate the situation in the Middle East. Meanwhile, about 50 countries have already provided Ukraine with military equipment and weapons during the 9 months of the full-scale war. Who helps and in which way? See right now in the next review.
The Ukrainian military worked out the enemy target with the help of HIMARS. Just one name of this high-precision missile complex terrifies the invaders. According to the Russian prisoners, their command promises a large reward for the destruction of the HIMARS systems.
Different price for each combat machine. They promise 80,000 rubles for a destroyed tank. And how much are they promising for the destroyed HIMARS? Approximately 1 million rubles.
Currently, our military has 38 HIMARS systems provided by the United States. In general, since the beginning of the Russian invasion, Ukraine has received the following military assistance from its partners: 49 helicopters and airplanes, 631 tanks, 915 artillery systems, 1,682 units of armored vehicles, 2,042 armored cars, 4,261 unnamed aerial vehicles of various purposes, 6,260 portable anti-aircraft missile systems, 81,805 guided missiles, grenade launchers and anti-tank missile systems. During the 9 months of the full-scale war, Ukraine received the most military aid from the USA, Great Britain, the Czech Republic, Germany, Poland, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. Ukraine Defense Contact Group Ramstein has already held 7 meetings this year. Currently, partner countries have focused on assistance with air defense systems.
Ukraine's most urgent self-defense needs. Ukraine's troops continue to consolidate their gains on the battlefield as they head into the winter. And the contact group continues to push hard to bolster Ukraine's air defenses in the face of Russia's ongoing barrages. I'm pleased to be able to report that the NASAMS air defense systems that we've sent to Ukraine are now operational, and their performance so far has been very impressive. The NASAMS systems had a 100% success rate in intercepting Russian missiles as the Kremlin continues its ruthless bombardment of Ukraine.
Aid to Ukraine and Russian aggression as a large-scale threat to world democracies were discussed at the Security Forum held from November the 18th to 12th in Halifax, Canada. Experts agree that winter will have a decisive influence on the course of the war, but in the coming month the fighting on the front will slow down due to worsening weather conditions.
Come January, February, that ground probably will freeze, which could lend itself to offensive operations. So there could be a lot of activity in the winter, but typically speaking, because of the weather, the tactical operations will slow down a bit. And I think if there's a slowdown in the actual tactical fighting, if that happens, then that may become a window, possibly, it may not, for a political solution, or at least the beginnings of talks to initiate a political solution.
American officials say that Russia will use the weather break to retrain troops at the front, but they will continue to actively attack the infrastructure of Ukrainian cities to intimidate civilians. Ukraine is also advised to use this time to restore their own defense forces and prepare for a counter-offensive.
Hanna Gupko, the founder of National Interest Advocacy Network ANTS, joins me now. Hello and welcome.
Welcome.
How worried the West is that the full-scale war in Ukraine has dragged on for 9 months already and has affected most of the countries of the world?
So I think for Ukraine it's crucially important to explain the strategic value for the West of Ukraine defeating Russia, because Russian illegal annexation of Crimea started in 2014. So it's almost 9 years of war with genocidal period of full-scale escalation, 9 months. So this is why it's crucially important to raise the issue of more heavy artillery, more weapons like F-16, NASAMS, ATACMS, to help Ukraine to win faster, quicker. And we, during the international forums, like one just happened in Canada, Halifax Security Forum, we explain why Ukraine defeating Russia quicker is in the interest of collective West. Because the world will not face inflation, there will be no weaponization of energy, and Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism will be held accountable.
Yeah, I do understand this position, but have you experienced, and is there any exhaustion from the war in Ukraine among the international community?
Actually, everyone is talking about fatigue, but fatigue of Russia, because even Russian so-called opposition, when they are talking about Marshall Plan for Russia, and then former president of Baltic state like Estonia saying like, Russians, forget about Marshall Plan for Russia. You have to condemn totalitarian regime and actually to the genocide and demand tougher sanctions. And I do hope that in ninth package of the EU of sanctions, we will see sanctions against Rosatom, Kirill, the FSB agent Gundyaev, and of course Wagner Group, which is everywhere, not just in Ukraine battlefield, but also in Mali, in other African countries. So they should be also recognized as a terroristic organization. And in December, Congress will consider another budget supplementary for Ukraine, and I hope this package of 37 billion of US dollars will be adopted before Christmas. And this will be another sign that the West is helping Ukraine to defeat Russia, and no fatigue, only a strong dedication, commitment to see that Crimea is an achievable goal for next year, and armed forces received everything we need to continue our successful counter-offensive operations.
So, except of the sanctions we've talked right now applied in Russian businesses, you've mentioned 37 billion of US dollars. So what are the particular plans of the West to support Ukraine during the winter time? And I'm not just talking about like generators or blankets. Do we have like a strict plan? What we have to do and what can we accept like the next couple of months?
Volodymyr, it's a very good question, but we are trying to convince our Western partners from Ramstein coalition that F-16, ATACMS, NASAM first, then generators, which are crucially important like transformators and others. But we were warning Washington, D.C., Brussels, London in June that Holodomor will be happening in autumn, that Russia will be deliberately attacking critical infrastructure and killing civilians. So actually all what we forecasted is happening now. So this is why the clear lessons learned that we have to prevent new massive rockets, missile attacks, strikes on Ukrainian cities. Without rockets, without fighter jets, because we failed to, when we demanded in March no-fly zone over Ukraine, West didn't support it. So now all damage or destroyed critical infrastructure is a result of delay of weapons we need. So we have to raise the geopolitical actuality of Ukraine defeating Russia first. That this is a strategy actually to weaken China. Everyone is worried about China and thinking that if Russia loses, it means that China will become stronger. No, China will be losing also. It's a powerful signal for China, seeing that how Russia is being defeated in Ukraine, not to attack Taiwan, or actually we know that Chinese ambitious is the global dominance. It's not just about attack on Taiwan or other battlefields in the Indo-Pacific region. So I think it's worth to explain our partners, prevention matters. After almost 9 years of deterrence strategy of the West failed, and after peaceful settlement of Russian aggression for 8 years, we ended up with genocide. And now 9 months of genocidal period of Russian aggression against Ukraine. So it's great that European Parliament recognized Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. They are planning to adopt another resolution on tribunal, then confiscation mechanism, we Ukrainians want to see how the West is helping us with financial support, not loans, because it means that it's a way of slavery, let me be frank. So frozen assets of Russian central bank, Russian oligarchs should be confiscated like Canada adopted a bill. And all this money should go to Ukraine because we have to win, but it doesn't mean that after victory we will have billions of dollars loans and my grandkids will have to return this. Of course, everything we now receive, we will return, but it's really important that Russia should pay for the genocide against Ukraine.
Thank you so much, and a special thanks for your help and your support. Anna Hopko was the first guest of Spotlight Ukraine, and now we continue. In addition, the Ukrainian military receives a lot of equipment and ammunition to fight the occupiers from the occupiers themselves, the so-called Russian Lend-Lease. Of course, air defense systems or HIMARSes are not on the list, but for example, since the beginning of the full-scale war, our military has recaptured about 400 tanks from the Russians, and this is almost as much as Western partners gave us. How Russians' weapons work against Russians. See in our review right now.
Weapons were captured from Russian tourists near Balakleya. Somebody is capturing tanks, and we captured a helicopter. Another Lend-Lease from the Russians. All boxes are filled. That's tons of ammo. It's 10 meters to the Russian border, and they left all that, or maybe they were running away quickly.
The exact figure of Russian weapons captured by Ukrainian defenders during the 9 months of full-scale war is currently unknown. But no wonder Ukrainian military jokes about Russian Lend-Lease. Only during the counter-offensive in the Kharkiv region, our army received more than 400 million worth of Russian equipment and ammunition as trophies, according to analysts. 97 tanks, 159 armored vehicles and 55 artillery systems. This is enough to create at least one tank or 2 mechanized brigades.
We are now at the damaged vehicle workshop of our brigade. We repair combat vehicles here, both the ones that are part of our equipment as well as trophy vehicles. We constantly have to change the places of such points, because we understand that there are collaborators and spies. That's why we move once every 2 or 3 months.
Captured Russian equipment is mostly obsolete, both morally and technically, say our military, but it still helps the Ukrainian army to be more successful at the front.
Lawrence Friedman, Emeritus Professor of War Studies, King's College London, is my next guest. So hello and welcome.
Glad to be with you.
So, the summit of foreign ministers of NATO countries will be held in Bucharest next week. What to expect? Will Ukraine receive new air defense systems, or this question is not on the agenda right now yet?
I think the question is on the agenda, and I think there's a lot of pressure to provide new air defense systems. Clearly, a certain amount is being done already, but it's very evident that Ukraine has a serious need there. The issue is what sort of air defense systems and how quickly they can be got to you. And I think that's probably the biggest issue.
Will it be enough to shut down the sky above Ukraine?
You can't shut down the sky across Ukraine. I mean, there's too much sky. I think the question is, can you have better point defense of particular installations so that at least you can do more to protect your infrastructure? It's always an issue with air defenses. Do you try to give as much area coverage as possible, or do you make sure that particular installations get protected?
Oh yeah, by the way, Poland asked Germany to transfer Patriot systems to Ukraine. Yeah. Do we have to expect that Berlin will delay this decision or not?
It's an interesting one. Berlin has been very cautious, but it's hard to see personally, I mean, I don't have any inside information on the deliberations of the German government, but personally, I can't quite see why you should object to sending Patriot. It is an air defense system. How good it'll be is an interesting question, but it's not. It's quite an old system, but it has a good pedigree and it could probably do quite a lot, and it doesn't raise the sort of issues that tanks appear to raise as being suitable for offensive operations. So I don't particularly see any reason why not, other than practical ones and logistical issues. But Germany, unfortunately, has a habit of dragging its feet on these issues.
I got a very good question. So the full-scale Russian invasion has been going on in Ukraine for more than 9 months. The West announces new military aid packages every single week, but evidently it's not enough. So what is the reason? Why?
Well, I mean, you could always use more. I mean, militaries never have enough. So in that sense, correctly, in a sense, you're never going to be satisfied. You'll always want more. I think you've also got to recognize that the politics of this has shifted. And I think that really shifted early on in the conflict when it was demonstrated by Ukraine that it was going to fight, which was the first issue, that it was going to resist, that it was unlikely that systems were just going to fall into Russian hands, which was another issue, but they could be used professionally. And I think also you've got to realize that Western inventories are being run down. I mean, there are real issues now about what is left, and I think that's creating its own challenges in terms of making sure that Ukraine has enough ammunition, has the shells. So that may require looking to different sorts of system where you know that you can get the ammunition to go with them, rather than systems that have been used already by Ukraine, but where stocks are running out. So it's quite a complex issue. It's not just a straightforward one of looking to see what you've got in the cupboard and handing it over. It's got to be able to fit in with Ukrainian military needs and be sustainable over some time. We're entering a very difficult period now with the winter, which will test logistics. You need systems that can cope with the winter, and so on. So these things aren't straightforward. I think there's a willingness in the West to do what it can. It's committed now. It's got very little choice but to make sure Ukraine prevails. But the practicalities are not all just made up. Some of them are really quite serious.
The winter period, the winter time, will help more Ukrainian army, or on the opposite, the Russians?
I think it'll help Ukraine. It's your country. I think you'll have better winter kit. A lot of the mobilized troops from Russia don't appear to have a decent kit even for the early autumn, never mind the middle of winter. And I think that was going to create a lot of its own issues. And Ukraine has got a determination to press on. It won't be easy because bad weather does hinder operations, whether for now, maybe just with boggy ground. So it does create its own practical issues. But I don't see any reason why it should impede Ukraine moving forward. Indeed, all the incentives are for Ukraine to press on as fast as it can, because your situation at home isn't getting any easier, while the Russians certainly are hoping for a period of time to get their mobilized troops into some sort of shape for more offensive operations in February, March, or whenever. So it's every incentive for Ukraine to press on.
Thank you. Thank you once again for your answers, and let's hope for the quick victory.
Let us hope so. Thank you.
Mr. Lawrence Friedman was the guest of Spotlight Ukraine. Like, share, and subscribe. Russia continues terrorist attacks on Ukrainian cities. The occupiers fired 67 rockets just on November the 23rd. Residential buildings and power plants in Kyiv, Lviv, Vinnytsia and Zaporizhzhia regions were shelled. Millions of Ukrainians were left without electricity. 10 people died as a result of this impact. In addition, Russian occupiers shelled a hospital in Vilnyansk, Zaporizhzhia region. The rocket destroyed the two-story building on the maternity ward, and a two-day-old baby died. The boy's mother and two doctors managed to be pulled out of the rubble alive. About 40% of energy facilities were destroyed due to constant Russian shelling, Ukrainian authorities report. Fan power outages have been introduced throughout the whole country. However, Ukrainian business continues to work. How to adapt to continuous blackouts, our journalist will tell you right now.
In this small coffee shop in Lviv, the lights are turned off almost every day. But buying an electric generator is too expensive, they say here. Therefore, when there is no electricity, ready-made pastries are offered to customers. Tea and coffee are stored in thermoses.
We can't cook anything when there is no electricity, except for offering the ready-made products. There is no gas here. In order to feed all the processes, I need a powerful generator, which costs 250,000 hryvnias. The problem is, I don't earn that much.
This restaurant bought an electric generator, but it is very difficult to work now, and profits have fallen, they complain here. They earn only to cover employee salaries, utilities and taxes.
We are able to partially power our kitchen with a generator. We also have powerful units for our accounting department and a coffee maker. And of course, the work of the heating system was minimized. Currently, we don't heat all the halls.
The shopping centers have several powerful generators in case of power outages, but tenants are asked to turn off anything unnecessary. Therefore, in times of shutdown, the corridors are dimly lit, but the shops are still opened.
Even before the hostilities began, we had 4 generators. We adapted them to the needs of our tenants. If the tenant listens to our requests and turns off 70% of the lights, then something necessary works, such as a cash register, some minimal lighting, and we can keep our shopping center running.
Power outages occur throughout Ukraine. However, there are lucky people whose electricity is turned off only in emergency cases, as a rule during missile strikes. This is due to the fact that critical objects of the social sphere are not turned off. For example, hospitals, metro, rescue services or communal services. Therefore, all household consumers who have light from the same line with such objects do not fall under the blackout.
And now let's talk about the business, the economy in times of war with my next guest, Svetlana Mikhailovska, the European Business Association Deputy Director. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Russian terror and this winter are causing huge problems for Ukrainians and businesses in particular. So, how serious is this challenge for the economy of Ukraine and entrepreneurs?
I would say it's indeed a very serious challenge. Ukrainian businesses are struggling to adapt to widespread blackouts that have become a feature of current daily life. Business activity had significantly worsened since the Russian strikes began on 10th of October, because just before that period, by the end of September, we conducted the research among the members of the European Business Association. And the feedback was that obviously they are striving, but majority of them managed to recover their operations. Would it be relocation to the western part of Ukraine? Would it be adaptation to new realities, finding new partners and new opportunities for them? But last week, Ukrainian Economy Minister, Vice Prime Minister and the Minister of Economy of Ukraine, Yulia Sviridenko, told reporters that Russian strikes on critical infrastructure could lead to a larger economic contractions this year, even over than 35 originally expected. So obviously some larger enterprises appear to be better equipped to cope with uncertainties and blackouts. However, We all heard that yesterday the industrial giant ArcelorMittal also temporarily suspended steel and rolled products production until the stabilization of energy supply in the country.
Yeah, that's really huge numbers, unfortunately. But what is the role of the state in support of businesses right now, and is there any?
Obviously, we clearly understand that majority of attention is now focused on military support, and that's clear. And even the budget for the upcoming year, the state budget of Ukraine, which was adopted by the parliament, mostly addresses the needs of the military and safety. But obviously, there are a number of projects which are also would require attention of the government, like infrastructure, reconstruction of roads, infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and recovery of these objects. But what we see from business perspective, the major role of the government is right now not to support business financially. It's obviously not the time for that, but not to waste time and proceed with reforms. We've got this candidacy status, which allows us to move forward with the reforms in terms of liberalization of certain regulations in terms of business environment, harmonization of our standards. Of course, rule of law is #1 priority for the government these days. And obviously, currently we understand that no fiscal pressure is even possible to consider due to huge losses that suffers business these days.
Do we have to expect any tax reductions or exemptions?
I don't think so, because we have to support our social sector, obviously. But business is also plays a significant social role by establishing the jobs. And that's why business also plays a significant role in contribution into the governmental and state budget by paying taxes. That's why we need liberalization in terms of doing business. We really ask for transparent dialogue because, for instance, when it comes to blackouts, we really need transparent dialogue with business from governmental institutions and authorities, because there are lots of stakeholders. And business need prediction, because what we see from different industries, actually, from dairy industry, animal, even IT industry, there should be certain certainty. I'm sorry for this, but obviously we need to elaborate this tolerance to uncertainty these days. But at least having this transparent dialogue, what are the problems, would help business to understand the needs of the government and government to understand problems the business faces.
Thank you so much for your answers. Thank you, Svetlana. And let's hope for the best. So I do have another guest, the founder of the Strum digital agency, Roman Timotsko. Hello and welcome.
Good evening.
So I saw the administrative buildings on your map and businesses on the map of the places where you can get the certain, like when you can have your power banks recharge and phones and whatsoever. So how quickly does this map you've invented expand, and what is the procedure for appearance on the map?
So it's a volunteer project, so anyone can add a new point to the map. We are partnering with Lviv City Council and hopefully with other local authorities and communities to expand them. Currently we have only Lviv, Kyiv and Rivne, but now we are working on Dnipro, Ivano-Frankivsk, Uzhhorod, maybe Lutsk and Poltava. So anyone who wants to add their city to the map can easily approach us through our website or email or social media accounts, and the new info on new points to add on the map.
Do you have any statistics? How many people can visit your site and use the map like every day?
So at this point, we created the map only a week ago, and now around 250,000 people used the map.
That's huge.
So yeah, it's going a bit viral, and we hope to make this process of finding electricity for more easier.
By the way, the head of the National Police of Ukraine stated that more than 1,200 national police departments across the whole country are ready to welcome citizens who need help. Why are they still not on your map? Can we see that the police with the people again? Policja z narodem?
Well, it's a matter of time until the police stations appear on our map. We are waiting for police to approach us to send their point map. And I hope it's a matter of days. Also, it's great that other institutions, government and local authorities create their own maps. So we don't want the monopoly on the map market. And it's great that other maps are also creating now after we did. So the more maps, the more Ukrainians know where to go when they don't have power at their homes or offices.
Yeah, that's really good attitude. Let's talk a bit about the IT sector right now in Ukraine. So it is the IT is one of the first which recover relatively quickly since the full-scale Russian invasion. What is the current state of affairs among your colleagues in the business?
So basically, from what I believe, most IT companies in Lviv and Kyiv, from what I know, they still have their contracts with Western businesses, Western clients, and they try to do their best to continue working and achieving their goals and complete their projects. So I believe that the IT sector is pretty adaptable and everything will be fine and our economy will still be rising. However, it's difficult and challenging now to have non-stop, constant power at offices and homes, but most of IT companies I know have their own autonomous energy source to continue working.
Nevertheless, thank you for your volunteering work and for this beautiful map you've just created. Thank you once again. This is Spotlight Ukraine. The Russian propaganda machine this week has intensified its campaign against Ukraine, both inside the country and abroad. Here is an overview of the new Kremlin's lies.
Putin is trying to turn Ukrainian people against each other. By spreading fake messages, Kremlin says Kyiv is supplying energy to different regions of Ukraine unequally. So the west of the country allegedly gets more electricity than, for example, southern Odessa city. At the same time, scheduled hourly power outages have been introduced throughout the whole Ukraine equally. Also, Kremlin is spreading misinformation about the alleged export of Ukrainian electricity to European Union countries.
While people in Odessa are blocking roads out of desperation, there have been residents of Odessa sitting without electricity for the fourth day. The Ukrainian budget receives profits from the sale of electricity to Europe out of plan.
This way, Russian Federation is trying to mislead Ukrainians and divert the public's attention from the only reason for the blackout – missile attacks on energy facilities. Electricity export of electricity from Ukraine was fully stopped after the first attack on the power system. All available Ukrainian generation capacities currently work only for the needs of Ukrainian consumers. Shooting at civilian infrastructure and then blaming Ukraine for it is the highest cynicism, which clearly shows the face of the Russian Federation, the Center for Countering Disinformation reports. After withdrawal from strategically important Kherson city in the south of Ukraine, Russia still tries to somehow explain its failure to citizens. Considering this is a military disaster for Kremlin, even Putin's propagandists cannot spin Russia's retreat from Kherson. So, as usual, they decided to blame Ukraine. Moscow is trying to persuade its people that the Ukrainian military has already executed 39 pro-Russian residents of Kherson and hounds the pro-Russian population. Meanwhile, the real people of Kherson are living in complete darkness as Russia destroyed the city's energy facilities. Ukrainian authorities are trying to restore connection and energy supply as soon as possible. Pentagon does not believe Ukraine will win Russia. This kind of fakes Russia introduces this week, while Kremlin troops continue losing on the battlefield. The Center for Strategic Communications noted that Russian propagandists distorted the words of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the U.S. Armed Forces, General Mark Milley. General Milley actually said that Ukraine is unlikely to liberate all its territory exclusively by military means in the next few weeks. In addition, Mark Milley said the Russian military was really hurt in bed after nearly 9 months of the war in which the Kremlin has failed to achieve any of its goals. The Ukrainians have racked up success after success after success, Milley quipped, while the Russians have failed every single time. Russian propaganda abroad also targeted Poland. If to be more precise, Kremlin tries to turn allies against each other. For example, by spreading info about so-called Poland plans to occupy the western regions of Ukraine, and that Poland, at the behest of the US, is ready to go to war with Russia and demands an apology from Ukraine. However, Polish leader Andrzej Duda said there is no crisis of confidence between Warsaw and Kiev due to the missile incident in Przewodu and different assessments in Poland and Ukraine about what happened.
And now it's time to talk about the global politics and Ukrainian role in it. And hopefully we do have Yuri Fizer, our global news editor. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Volodymyr.
So I bet that the main news we have to start with is that European Parliament recognized Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. Am I right?
Yes, you are quite right. And probably this is the main news from the West because Russia, as you already said, was recognized a country sponsoring terrorism. Yep. It's not Biden's decision, and this decision will later be sent to all the members of the European Union, but still the decision was made in the European Union. And this week the world also talked a lot about Ukraine. In the current situation for us it's good because we've got a lot of publicity and the world knows what is really happening in our country, and the world knows about all the atrocities and about all the crimes Russia continues to commit in our country. But nevertheless, as you already said, the most important event is the declaration of Russia to be the state-sponsored terrorism.
You're smiling right now.
So let's start with this. Russia is a state sponsor of terrorism, and it's a country using means of terrorism in its activity. On Wednesday, November 23, deputies of the European Parliament made a relevant decision. 494 deputies of the highest legislative body of the Free Europe voted in favor of this decision. 58 were against. Unfortunately, 44 abstained. The resolution of the European Parliament also states that Russia is committing indiscriminate attacks on residential areas and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine, as a result of which thousands of people have died. Unfortunately, Moscow violates the Charter of the United Nations. That is why the members of the European Parliament called on the leaders of the member states of the European Union to isolate Russia, in particular deprive it of membership in international organizations and bodies, not to hold any official events in the territory of the aggressor country, and speed up the preparation of the 9th package of anti-Russian sanctions. And I will talk more, Volodymyr, about this with my guests. And Tatiana Vysotska, special correspondent in the European institutions, is joining me right now. Tatiana, greetings and thanks for joining us.
Good evening, studio. Yes, I was listening of what you were talking about, and I want to add about this resolution to recognize Russia as a state sponsor of the terrorism, that this resolution may have practical consequences in the very near future, because in particular in the official documents of the European Parliament is in particular written that it is a step on the way for President of Russia, Putin, and his government to be held accountable for the war crimes before the International Tribunal, which is not created yet, but anyway. And the next practical step is already known. It's the creation by the European Union of the list of the terrorist states, because Russia is the first terrorist state which is recognized as such by the European Union. And Russia will be put on this list, and the European Union will apply more severe sanctions for that. And also in the resolution of the European Parliament, there is one very important point about including of the Russian paramilitary organizations like Wagner Group or Kadyrov Special Motorized Regiment to already existing European Union list of terrorist organizations. And it's very important indeed. And also, if we are talking about the European Parliament decisions, I would like to add about granting to Ukraine of 18 billion euros of microfinancial aid for 2023. Which is also very important because, as the European Commission estimates, it will cover almost the half of needs of Ukraine for the next year in international help. Because the European Commission thinks that we will need every month extra 3-4 billion of euros for the next year. So it's very essential and very important decision also. And I would like to say that it is not a gift of the Europe. It is not a gift of Europe to Ukraine. It's a loan, but it's a very long-term loan which shall to be paid in 35 years. And the first payment is expected in 2033. So Ukraine will have time to recover the economy and to start to pay this money back.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you. Thank you very much. This was Tatiana Vysotska, special correspondent in the European institution. She joined us through Skype. So, Volodymyr, as you heard, it's very, very, very important for us. And
yeah, it's crucial and vitally important for the economy, especially in times of war, to have such a long-term support from the European Union. It's true.
And not only this financial support, but also the decision. We have started with the decision to designate Russia the state sponsor of terrorism.
The sequences.
That's very good. And I have another guest, Volodymyr, Mr. Jakob Dalunde, a member of the European Parliament representing Sweden, is joining us. Mr. Dalunde, greetings and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
So we are talking about a resolution of the European Parliament that designates Russia to be a state sponsor of terrorism. How will this help to hold Russia accountable for its crimes committed in Ukraine?
Well, it sends a strong signal both to Russia and the rest of the world that we do not tolerate this terror that Russia imposes on the Ukrainian population. And I hope that in the future it will also lead to more legal measures that we'll be able to be used to make sure that this kind of terror will not be able to continue.
But as far as I understand, this decision is not binding for the European countries, I mean for the members of the European Union. Is there in these countries the understanding to support this decision?
Yes, that is correct, that this decision that we took today is not a legal measure, but rather a political signal that this is something that we would want for the future. So, but it is the first step in that process. Yes, that is correct.
And what is the second step?
Well, there will be a discussion in the EU Commission and among European Union member states on how to take this process going forward. But that is a process that will take some time. But the most important thing to do right now is to rally political support, both to increase the financial support and the military support to Ukraine, and also to isolate Russia, to make sure that other countries all around the world take part in increasing sanctions towards Russia. And in this process, this political signal can be useful also in the short term.
Okay, thank you. Will the EU in general and Sweden in particular have enough patience to support Ukraine until we win in this war against Russian aggression?
I think so, and I will do my best to do so as well. We need to make sure to handle the energy situation so that this energy warfare that Russia tries to impose on the European Union does not undermine the will to support the Ukrainian people. But so far, I have been heartened by the support both from the public and from the political sphere in the support for Ukraine, even though we need to do so much more, both in the humanitarian support but also military support.
Okay, and will the European Union be able to set the price cap on Russian oil, and when can we expect the ninth package of anti-Russian sanctions?
Unfortunately, on this area, we're moving far too slow. In the European Parliament, months ago, we voted to ban all fossil imports from Russia to the European Union. And I'm very unhappy with the lack of progress in the European Council, where the European governments are represented. I think it's such a hypocrisy that we, on the one hand, support Ukraine financially and militarily, but at the same time fund the Russian military machine by buying fossil fuels from them. And this abomination needs to stop.
Mr. de Lunde, thank you very much for answering my question, and thank you very much for all the help and support we are getting from you personally as a member of the European Parliament and from Sweden. Thank you very much. This was Mr. Jakob de Lunde, a member of the European Parliament representing Sweden. Volodymyr, yep. I have a question to you. After Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, resigned as a Prime Minister, a lot of people here in Ukraine started worrying about what would be the future support of London for Ukraine. Did you worry, but frankly?
No, well, I'm not going to lie, yes. I was worried a little bit, because I was worried whether the support that the Boris Johnson's cabinet has started could be shrinking or reduced, and I was really happy when the election was finished and we saw the next prime minister who supports Ukraine right now.
Good to hear this from you. Don't worry. London is with us. This was confirmed by the current Prime Minister of Great Britain, Rishi Sunak. By the way, he visited Ukraine last week and he met with the President of our country, Volodymyr Zelensky. Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister of Great Britain, visited Ukraine. He discussed with our President the most important issues of Ukraine and Britain, as well as for global security. During the meeting, the British Prime Minister promised to provide additional military aid, in particular 120 anti-aircraft guns, radar stations, as well as special winter equipment for the military. The total cost of the aid package will cost about $60 million. Britain will also allocate about $15 million for the response within the World Food Programme and about $5 million for the international organizations for migration. And this is what Rishi Sunak said while meeting with our President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv. Let's just hear.
This year alone, we have provided £2.3 billion of military support, and we will do the same again next year. As you succeed in pushing back Russian forces on the ground, your homes, your hospitals, your power stations are being destroyed by the air. So to help you defend yourselves, we are today providing new air defense support, including 120 anti-aircraft guns, radar, and anti-drone equipment.
So, as you heard, Volodymyr, we will have the support from Great Britain, so don't worry, as I told you. But the British Prime Minister continues the course of the former head of the British government, Boris Johnson. Let's hear of what Mr. Johnson had to say about this course, and about Western support for Ukraine in his interview for the CNN.
What happened was everybody, Germans, French, Italians, everybody, Joe Biden, saw that there was simply no option because you couldn't negotiate with this guy. That's the key point. That's where the logic all breaks down when people call for a negotiated solution. There is no deal. He's not offering one.
So quite inspiring, isn't it, Volodymyr?
Yeah, it's really inspiring. But now let's draw some attention to another international event that has been held like 5 days ago, the presidential elections in Kazakhstan. So this country is also crucially and vitally important in terms of the full-scale invasion of Russia and Ukraine.
Yes, you are quite right. Many people in Ukraine, for example, think that Kazakhstan is too far from Ukraine.
Like neutral.
Yeah, maybe like neutral, but they don't understand that Kazakhstan had very close relations with Russia, and that's a threat for Ukraine. And so these elections are very important for us. And now it's official. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev became the president of Kazakhstan. The head of the Central Election Commission of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Nurlan Abdilov, announced the final results of the country's presidential elections. About 70% of Kazakhs voted. The elected president won 81% of the votes. Tokayev has become president of Kazakhstan in 2018 after Nursultan Nazarbayev, who had led the country for 28 years, supported Tokayev's candidacy in the early elections. On June 17, 2022, Tokayev stated that he would not recognize quasi-state entities in Donbass controlled by the Kremlin. In February, Kazakhstan refused Russia's request to join its troops for a full-scale offensive against Ukraine, as well as to recognize the self-proclaimed LNR and DNR. So, is this Central Asian country slowly moving from the Russian orbit, Volodymyr?
That's a really good question.
This and more I will ask my next guest. This is Akejan Kayagaldin, former Prime Minister of Kazakhstan. Mr. Kayagaldin, greetings and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Kayagaldin, from what we see now in Kazakhstan, based on the election that took place in your country a few days ago, is Kazakhstan slowly moving from the Russian orbit?
I think so. We're slowly moving toward real independence. But obviously, I have to say, we're going to be long in the future, a long time, under influence of two big elephant states surrounding us. One of them is Russia, and another one is China, a 1.5 billion population. But right now, we're moving toward the way with our nation's claim 30 years. And hopefully, this time, we will approach our goal. And hopefully, I believe that the new administration will deliver what they promised 6 months and 11 months ago.
Mr. Kayagaldin, why does Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, the president of Kazakhstan, newly elected president of Kazakhstan, abstain from helping Russia in its aggressive war in Ukraine? Well, it's good for us, but why does he do it?
We all in Kazakhstan, we all understand that today in Ukraine, what's going on there is not just you fighting for your independence, for your freedom. You're also fighting for freedom and independence of former Soviet Union states, which is still widely open eye, watching what's going on there. And you must understand that the sentiment of Kazakh and Uzbek and Kyrgyz, all the people, ordinary people, including political class, even leadership, they're just willing you to win this war. Because you're right now not depending only Europe, you're right now depending freedom in former Soviet Union territory. This is why.
That's true. But do Russians somehow try to press you to help them?
Of course, they will. You know, we're having over 7,000 kilometers border and a huge influence, and we absolutely depending the route to global market for oil, for gas, other raw materials is crossing out via Russia. And that's right now why we're looking for new routes, and probably our future global market is going to be across China and Far East Asia. This is something very new for us.
In January this year, at the beginning of January this year, you had protests in Kazakhstan. Why did they fail?
The protest was, you know, it's a long time running problem with economy. We're not recovering since 2008 financial crisis, and this almost, you know, permanently going crisis, plus huge wave of corruption and a big amount of money, over 300 billion right now in the foreign account in foreign country. That's why Peter was very upset. But former regime, they tried to get back to power. They tried to dismiss Tokayev from position, and it was coup against him, quite bloody one. It was huge bloodshed. That gentleman who is right now elected again, and you can understand why he called early the snap election, because right now he wants to be real independent president. He wants to cut it off, past connection to President Nazarbayev, because he wants really to deliver what he promised the nation.
By the way, you mentioned President Nazarbayev, and my last question to you will be about him. What does he do now?
He's claimed that he's retired pensioner, but he's trying to get back to political life. But you must understand, all his children, 3 daughters and 2 son-in-laws, they're over 60 right now, and they're very rich, and I'm quite sure they're trying to get back to power. This is one of the biggest challenge for, not only for Mr. Tokayev, it's big challenge for all Kazakhs.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kayagildin. Thank you for your answers. This was former Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, Akejan Kayagildin. So this is it about Kazakhstan, at least for now. Have you ever been to Taiwan?
No, I haven't, but I do have a visit to this country because I had some plans, but they have changed. But hopefully someday I will visit
someday you will go there, yeah?
Because there are some strong links with Ukraine and this country, and some people, they can compare both, like Ukraine and Russia, and Taiwan and China.
I've never been to Taiwan too. The furthest in the east I've been is Middle East, but nevertheless. For 9 months now, Taiwan has not hesitated to support Ukraine in the struggle that inspired the inhabitants of the island to confront their threat from China and some to join the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine. That is why members of the Ukrainian parliament proposed to open representative office in Taipei in Kyiv. Taiwan belongs to the 20 most powerful economies in the world. According to the IMF forecast, Taiwan's GDP is in purchasing power parity is expected to be $1.6 trillion this year. The country of 23 million residents will be in the 19th place among world economies, slightly ahead of Australia and Poland.
Within the first week, there was a batch of medicines weighed about 27 tons was sent to Ukraine right after the war. And then the Taiwanese people said that they want to provide donation. So they urged the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to set up a donation account. And within a month, we collected about 33 million US dollars. That's not easy for the regular people's donation. And they also say that they want to provide material support. So we opened up the door for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to accept the material donation. At the end, we provided 562 tons of material to send to Ukraine. And we did this not because we are asking for anything in return, but because we think it is the right thing to do.
Anastasia Rava, Ukrainian journalist and editor-in-chief of the Ukrainian news TV channel Espresso, went on a press tour at the invitation of the Taiwan Minister of Foreign Affairs. Anastasia was the first Ukrainian journalist to be invited on such a visit. Anastasia met with the local authorities and learned about how Taiwan helps Ukraine, but also how Taiwan borrows Ukraine's experience in digitalization.
We paid very close attention, not just DIA, but before DIA, there was Prozoro, the open procurement platform for anti-corruption, better participation, and international communities. Because around 2014, we were pushing the same agenda in Taiwan for open procurement and contracting and so on. So we joined each other's forces on the open government partnership, sharing the toolkits, including the hackathon, well, not presidential hackathon, but certainly in Paris, right, in the president's office. And so all this connected our people-to-people ties, our civic technology communities together. And so when the DIA offered a easier-to-deliver form of such services, we were very excited.
And why do we at all compare Ukraine and Taiwan, and why Taiwan is quite important for us today? Vitaly Portnikov, Ukrainian journalist, explained this in his column at Visegrad Insights. And the answer is because we need each other. And Vitaly says that in spite of everything, we should do our best to develop mutual relations. And this is what he wrote in particular.
Ukraine has already seen from the example of relations with Russia how dangerous it is to succumb to blackmail in bilateral relations, and how a willingness to comply with a partner's wishes breeds a sense of impunity and rejection of equal dialogue. Kyiv's reluctance even now to notice Taiwan and Taiwan's sincere willingness to support Ukraine in its opposition to the aggressor shows that this blackmail syndrome has not yet been completely eliminated.
To know more about Taiwan-Ukraine relations, just read Vitaly Portnikov's article at Visegrad Insight. And this is all from me for today. See you next week, and back to you, Volodymyr.
Thank you so much for your attitude, and see you next week in our studio. That was Yuri Fizer, our global news editor, and now let's talk a bit about the social media. Raccoon in exchange for Russian prisoner of war. Ukrainians deal with power outages, and how Kim Jong-un took his daughter to a missile launch. Let's see our weekly social media reactions review right now.
Russian soldiers have very little chance to survive on the battlefield, so they try to escape from Ukraine in various ways. First and the most possible one is to surrender. For this purpose, Ukrainian intelligence even created a project working on identifying and collecting such representatives of Kremlin troops. As this number of Russian soldiers rises every day, it is likely Ukraine will organize special camps according to international law, advisor to President's office Alexei Arestovich says. However, there is a high chance no one will come to exchange surrendered ones, so Russians in Ukraine resort to very unusual methods. For example, this prisoner of war, Oleg Mokashov from Novosibirsk, asked the government of Russia to exchange him for a raccoon stolen by Russians from Kherson Zoo.
My name is Oleg Mokashov. I'm a private born in 1975 from Novosibirsk, and I'm asking the government of Russia to swap me for the Kherson raccoon.
According to Kherson Regional Council First Deputy Head Yuri Sobolevsky, in terms of combat potential, the men offered a completely equal exchange, and the Ukrainian side would even benefit. Obviously, if Russia does care about its troops, which was not a tendency before. Neither the state nor Russian comrades care about each other. Kremlin soldiers left a wounded fighter alone while retreating from a Ukrainian town. The armed forces of Ukraine found an enemy soldier under the bed in a destroyed house where he was hiding from the Ukrainian army.
We found a wounded Russian soldier. Your name is Misha, right? We gave him food and something to smoke. Misha is from Podmoskovia, right? His legs are in bad condition. All right, eat.
Besides war on the battlefield, Russia continues to frighten Ukraine's infrastructure. Half of the whole energy system is damaged. After the Kremlin's massive missile strike on November the 15th, 10 million Ukrainians have been left with no electricity. Power outages leave hundreds of thousands of homes in the dark as Putin tries to force Ukraine to surrender. But this will not break Ukrainians. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky says.
We can be left without money, without gasoline, without hot water, without light, but not without freedom, and it remains unchanged.
Moreover, in such a time of darkness, both literal and metaphoric, Ukrainians are still able to joke and be creative.
They are all a bunch of jerks.
How to make internet work without light? See this charger? We need to disconnect it. And what we need to connect is this wire. It costs 400 hryvnias. You can find it in online shop. And 3, 2, 1 power bank. And voila, everything works. He sleeps despite this noise. Let me show you our electric generator.
Dealing with power outages during wartime is really frustrating, but in typical Ukrainian fashion, you can find lots of jokes and memes about it online. Twitter user Kate Surkan says. And some news from the parallel universe. The supreme leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, took his daughter to a missile launch. You might ask why, but we do not know the answer either. Probably walking hand in hand with a daughter near a towering weapon of mass destruction is the proper way of educating and raising children. Kindly reminder, the missile Dad and Kid walked by was a huge rocket that could theoretically deliver a nuclear warhead to the mainland United States.
Despite the lack of the light, Ukrainians certainly do not lack of courage and ingenuity. The other day, a female resident of Kyiv came to a hardware supermarket due to a blackout to make the minced meat just in front of visitors and salesmen. War is war, but dinner will not cook itself. And here is another video confirming the resilience of Ukrainians as a nation. Odessa, a supermarket that runs on generators, and a woman with her morning routine. Be brave like Ukraine. That was Spotlight Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Like, share and subscribe on our YouTube channel Espresso Spotlight Ukraine. More news during the week. Find out there. See you next Friday. До побачення.